He Goes in Search of Freedom by Maria Soresina. Dedication to Federico, with the hope that you continue to ask why and what is it trying to say, also when he grows big. Page 13. Premise. He goes in search of freedom. Famous and fascinating words. Yes, but what freedom? The law to act according to your own will? Or the freedom from a corrupted and cruel world? Or from the misery of sin? The freedom that Dante goes in search of is what he will find only at the end of his long journey. It is the same as that which Jesus Christ speaks when he says, "If you remain in my word, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The essence of the Divine Comedy is expressed in this brief, sublime little verse of the Gospel of John. It is word that guides us to a freedom founded on the knowledge of truth. To reveal this truth is the scope of all Dante's work. Nevertheless, he hides it. Already in the banquet he in fact wrote that a more profound sense hides itself under the cloak of these tales, and there is a hidden truth under every lie. Dante constructed every scene of the poem with extreme precision. Nothing is left to chance. But, not dealing with a manual on philosophy, he is not held to expose his thoughts in the fullest manner. He leaves the conclusions to the readers, who are continually exhorted to search for the hidden truth, to discover the belief that hides itself under the strange verses. I don't remember any other text in which we are so strongly urged to collaborate, to penetrate the work, and to become protagonists. However, the reader does not seek answers and solutions in the notes of the commentators. He seeks them within himself. Dante did not write in Latin, but, page 14, in the vernacular, so as to be understood by all, even the little women, the wise old women, of the common people who had always indeed loved him. He wrote in a simple way for whoever is sufficient to use one's own good sense to understand, to discover the hidden truth. Then the reading of the comedy will become an enthusiastic voyage, and, as in every true voyage, everyone will experience different emotions, will find different verses that evoke personal memories, resonances, impressions, and will generate a personal reading, as is right when one comes face to face with every masterwork. On the one hand, Dante repeatedly invites us to search for the hidden doctrine. On the other hand, he adds that there will be few who understand your reason well. Only healthy minds will be able to discover it. Few will be able to follow it to the very end. It sounds like a challenge, and indeed he unleashed over centuries the imaginations of numerous readers, from celebrated poets like Ugo Foscolo and Giovanni Pascoli, and scholars like Gabriele Rossetti, René Guénon, and many others whose arguments are certainly interesting and sometimes brilliant. Unfortunately, the desire to offer a systematic picture has often led to generalizing a certain intuitive thinking, creating forcings that have compromised its credibility. But questionable representations have also always been present in official criticism. Both of them have basically committed the same error, supposing that the words of the poem mean something other than their common sense. Dante often recommends, like Jesus Christ, to remain in his word, in the wake of his boat that's singing crosses. He does it not surprisingly at the start of Paradise, and he recommends it to the few who will be able to follow him. He advises the others to turn back because they risk being lost. It would appear, therefore, that he believes the trail across paradise to be the most difficult, the most risky. I believe that is really so, because as Krishna Prem writes, whoever wants to follow someone who has gone into heaven does not have descriptions to help him. He must grow his own wings and fly. And the ancient way that is preached, under different names, from great sages of all times, leads essentially to knowledge of oneself. It happens through introspection, hell, and purification, page 15, purgatory. Then one needs to fly high across the heavens, beyond the stars, as it says in Beethoven's Hymn to Joy, sung in the Ninth Symphony. Ab nest du den Schöpfer Welt? Do you feel that there is a creator world? Such eben überm Sternen Zelt. Look for him above the starry heavens. Über Sternen müssen wohnen. Beyond the stars is where he must live. Now, on the one hand, it is true that the meeting with God above the starry heavens is an experience of light and liberty, far away from philosophical reasonings, doctrine, and dogmas, and also true that to live that experience, doctrines are necessary, or at least Dante believes so. A desire moves me to give that instruction, he wrote in the first pages of the Banquet. In the comedy, he urges the reader to track down the hidden doctrines, and the paradise contains long and complex doctrinal explanations. There is no doubt to transmit a doctrine was the primary objective of all his work. Which doctrine? My first book came out 7 years ago, The Secret Things, Dante Between Hinduism and Medieval Heresies, in which I accompany the reader through the three realms of Dante with the aim of highlighting the spiritual meaning. I support the consonance of this path with the path of yoga, and I pointed out some coincidences with Catharism, but cautiously, in a whisper. In these 7 years, I have done a thorough study, and gradually the conviction grew in me that Catharism was the source of Dante's original thinking. Rereading the comedy in the light of this hypothesis was to discover a treasure. So many were the precise coincidences that gave a new sense, profound and coherent, to many more or less hidden passages of the poem. What was a hypothesis in the beginning became a fact, and this second book has a precise aim to show and demonstrate the presence of Catharism as the primary source of the Divine Comedy, or rather to demonstrate that Dante's faith was the Christianity of the Cathars, not that of the Church of Rome. It's an ambitious objective and made difficult in the presence of centuries-old tradition that we have learned at school and, page 16, that was familiar and dear to us. To see it with eyes free of prejudice is to see that it is full of incongruencies and forcings, but that doesn't take from wanting to scratch it, proposing a different Dante, and it is a hard work. Also because of ostracism on the part of the critics, who, to use the words of Luigi Valli, will never admit that some might see in their texts that which they could not see. The sources that inspired Dante are numerous: the Gospels and the Bible, Thomas Aquinas and Joachim of Fiore, but also Virgil and the classical writings with their mythologies. He investigated everything, even Islam, sometimes exaggerating or minimizing the scope according to convenience. There is absolute silence in one regard, Catharism. And it is very strange if one takes into account in Florence around 1250 that 1/3 of the population adhered to it, and that during the entire arc of his life there would be hundreds of judicial processes and burnings at the stake in the area where he lived. Certainly, Dante never spoke about it in any of his works. Why? A response one could give is that already hypothesized by others. Given that he couldn't speak well of it, silence shows that he evidently did not want to speak badly of it. Beyond that which could seem like a joke, I think that whoever knows the stories of those years well knows that one could not expect to find an explicit affirmation favourable to Catharism on Dante's part. It would be suicide, not only for his own person, but also for his work. And it is the reason for which there is no hint of Catharism in any of the first commentaries. Such commentaries, indeed, to begin with those of his sons Jacopo and Pietro and that of Boccaccio, were written with the primary objective of throwing off any suspicion and of giving witness to the perfect orthodoxy of Dante. Today the Church considers him a champion of the Catholic faith. Paul VI, for example, dedicated to him the apostolic letter Motu Proprio, the highest song, in which he explained, Dante is ours we want to say, of the Catholic faith. It wasn't like that in the past. For centuries the Church considered him heretical and opposed the circulation of his works. Around 1330, the Dominican Guido Vernani, Chancellor of the University of Bologna, wrote that the comedy is like a vase decorated on the outside with seductive figures, containing, page 17, however, a pestilent poison. Dante was often defined by him as a demonic vase, and accused of guiding with his philosophy to the death of truth, not just the weak souls, but also the most holy saints. Monarchy was burned and was among the indexed books until 1881. While of the comedy, the only ones that could be circulated for centuries were the editions that had the dangerous passages cited in the index of cleansed books removed. But although cleansed, the reading was prohibited, however, inside the religious orders, and not recommended for others. From the beginning it was therefore prudent not to speak of Catharism and the heretical doctrine in the Dantean poem. But I ask myself, until when? I believe that today the serious scholar intending to know the thoughts of Dante can and indeed should analyse it among the various isms presented in his work, including Catharism. The Dantean poem is notoriously full of controversial expressions in its comparisons with the Church. Such criticisms, however, were common at the time. They were not only expressed by all the heretical sects, but also by members of the clergy, and even from the highest ecclesiastical levels. Starting with these, one couldn't in any way indicate the membership of Dante to any particular heretical movement. My approach is very different. I didn't start from Dante, nor from his very few orthodox expressions, but from the Cathars, from their doctrine, so different from that of the Catholic. And I saw with astonishment that everything that they believed finds itself reflected in the comedy, and is also that which the Church rejected. Everything. I also knew then that I would not be able to arrive at this result starting from Dante, because some of the most significant tests of his Catharism are not based on what there is, but on that which is not in the Divine Comedy. I'll offer one example. There is no hint of the Eucharist or the Mass. They are inconceivable absences for the time, but nobody has ever noticed. In my first book, I methodically retraced the path across the three realms. Here instead, as I set off from the doctrine of the Cathars to finally retrace the correspondences in the poem, it is unavoidable to jump from one to the other, taking for granted in a certain sense, page 18, knowledge of the comedy. But also, whoever has never read it will not have difficulty following the discourse, because I explain the context for every citation. And perhaps, it is my hope, this book will push people to reread it. The most interesting and intense parts are without doubt those in which I expose the correspondences with the doctrines and the beliefs of the Cathars. I understand the temptation to immediately jump to those chapters, but it would be a mistake. I have too often met in these years people, while open and friendly, when confronted with a Cathar Dante, kick back as against something absurd and derogatory. Going for a heretical Dante, going for an anti-clerical Dante, but not Cathar, because that would mean, in their eyes, his support of a narrow-minded and antisocial sect, misogynist and misanthropic. This idea is so widespread that I also wrote in the preceding book, Dante is not reducible to an ism, neither, be it quite clear, to Catharism. Today I would not add more, because I am convinced that he did not belong fully to any ism, but to the gospel, I could say, because faithful to this was that Christianity that we call Catharism. For centuries, the most infamous and false things were written about the Cathars, but anyone who knows them is enchanted by them, like Simone Weil, she whose passion flows out from the lively pages of her writings, as when she writes that Catharism in Europe was the ultimate living expression of that ancient thinking, reworked by Plato, from which Christianity was born. And she adds, but only the Gnostics, the Manichaeans, the Cathars, seem to have remained truly faithful. My book, therefore, also has a second objective, to make the Cathars known, the good Christians about whom so little is known, to tell their tragic story and explain their beliefs, re-establishing as much as possible the truth, freeing them from the mark of infamy that was cast upon them by the inquisitors, while their Christianity, adhering to the gospel and lived with admirable consistency, was joyous, open, non-violent, tolerant, and pervaded with spiritual depth. This double objective could be synthesized in one sentence to recount my personal voyage in the research for truth hidden under beautiful falsehood. It is for sure a journey of the mind, but it is also a journey of the heart. Page 19. 7 years of study on a new argument, never dealt with by anybody, yielding moments of exaltation, but also doubts, perplexity, exhaustion. This book would not have been possible without the suggestions, the advice, and also everyone's moral support. In the first place, that of my daughter Caterina, who was enthusiastic about this research, gradually exercising a most precious and patient constructive criticism, staying close to me with love and professionalism in all the many stages of planning. A heartfelt thanks to Luvi Mortola, who, in his long calls from Barcelona, reporting on points yet unclear, searching with passion up to the last, new solutions and more suitable words. I would like to thank Inez Cavalcanti for the faith and the insistence with which in these years has spurred me on to write. I am grateful to her for letting me know about the monastery in Seorge, where in the peace of my cell I could make the first draft. A thanks therefore also to Jean-Jacques Boin and Estelle Arnaud. Thanks for help also to Elisa Bartoldi and Patrizia Gioia. There are many, so many to mention all, the people who have been writing to me over the years, who invited me to hold conferences or classes, who have published my interviews and articles. It was an indispensable fount of encouragement and energy, as have been the faithful friends of the Wednesday group, where for more than 10 years I read the Divine Comedy. Thank you.